Since the dawn of the age of video games, there have been buttons to press. 1958's Tennis for Two is widely credited as the first video game created solely for entertainment purposes. And each player in that game has an aluminum controller with one knob and one button. Press a button on the controller and your game will perform an action in return. This is one of the oldest and most recognized rules in gaming. And with any rule, there's going to be people that try and break it. It's been 60 years since the rise of the video game controller, and I need a button pressed. But there's just one problem. I don't want to be the one pressing it. Shiny hunting in Pokemon is boring, or at the very least, it's very simple. For almost every shiny hunting method in the series, your goal is to perform the same mundane task over and over again, usually for hours, until you find a creature that's a different color than you normally expected. Despite its massive simplicity, I actually really enjoy shiny hunting. It's almost zen-like, giving you a simple activity that only requires a light amount of focus. And despite it not being a great challenge, it isn't completely brainless. If you aren't paying attention, there are usually a handful of ways to fail or mess up when you shiny hunt.
To me, when I got on the flight,
I heard you say, "Oh, Nick!" You just...
what?
But for the first time in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I found a shiny hunting method that feels almost completely uninteractive. Absolutely brain dead. And that is shiny Alolan hunting. Let's Go's pretty unique. Here you can trade an NPC, swapping a regular Pokemon for an Alolan one. And there's a very small chance, 1 in 4,096, that the NPC will inexplicably send you a shiny Pokemon. Not only is trading an NPC for shiny Pokemon kind of unheard of, but you can also trade these NPCs an infinite number of times. The game doesn't even force you to save when you trade, so if you don't find a shiny after sending a big bunch of trades, you can just reset and try all those trades again. You want to know how you trade in this game? Press A. 9 times. A, watch a cutscene, and then finally A to end the dialogue. Sure, you might have to do some legwork to get a batch of tradable Pokemon, but once you have that batch, the entire process is completely automatic. Press A, press A, press A, press A, press A, press the A, press A, press A, press A, press A, better press A, press A. This method finally broke me. Assuming we went for a pretty fair estimate of 4,000 trades before finding a shiny, we would be pressing the A button for 33 hours and 20 minutes. I thought to myself, why do I even need to be here? What if there was some way to get something to press the A button for me? Then, all I'd have to do is check the Pokedex once between each batch, see if I found the new Alolan shiny form recorded in it. If not, then the batch is a failure, I'd reset the game, and then I'd leave whatever mystery device I created to keep pushing that button for me. I could work, edit videos, watch movies, hang out with friends, whatever. And the whole time, my game would be shiny hunting for me. The question is, how are we going to push that button? Since the very beginning of Nintendo consoles, players have been wanting to do exactly what I've been describing. And the most classic solution to getting a button pressed for you is a turbo controller. The oldest one I've seen in person is 1987's NES Advantage, a joystick-like mega controller that offered a variety of knobs, features, and ways to get, well, an advantage over a normal controller. Usually, a turbo button lets you press a button multiple times per second as long as it's held down. Some turbo controllers even hold the button down for you. They're perfect for pressing a button faster than a human can, or in our case, pressing a button without us even needing a human in place. Sure seems like cheating, but hey, for the last 30 years, Nintendo has put their official seal on the technology. Here's Nintendo's seal, right now, right here, for a PDP branded controller with a turbo button. I've seen people use these in games like Xenoblade Chronicles 2. You can get your turbo controller to constantly spam A and fill your pouch with a bunch of items, slowly raising your trust with every blade to the max while you go off and live your life. These are wired controllers, which means all you have to do is plug them in via USB-C cable, and the game will recognize it as a Oh, come on! This is ridiculous! You can only use the Pokeball Plus or JoyCons to play Pokemon Let's Go. So yeah, if we could use the Pro Controller, I wouldn't even be making this video. Or if I did, It would be a whole lot shorter. We'd end it right now. Of course, there's no such thing as a third-party Joy-Con with the turbo button. In fact, there isn't really a third-party Joy-Con at all. Hori does make this one undocked mode only left Joy-Con to give you a better D-pad, but really, that's about it. So if something is pressing a button for us, it's gonna have to push a button on one of these bad boys. And technically, you don't even have to push A to say yes in Pokemon Go. You can press A, press the left stick, the right stick, R, L, ZL, and ZR. Of all these buttons, I've found that R and L seem to require the least amount of force to register a press. So what provides a constant force, both on and off, without ever stopping? My first thoughts turned to the Drinking Bird, a mid-1900s thermodynamic toy that relies on a clever shift of temperature, evaporation, and pressure in order to perform mechanical work. There's even a couple of instances where people use these toys to push a button in popular media, and I think that's what burned this idea into my brain. Like this scene from 1990's Darkman, where a bird is used to detonate a bomb. And then there's the 1995 Simpsons episode King Size Homer, where the perpetually lazy Homer Simpson uses a drinking bird in order to, get this, repeatedly press a key on his computer to do work for him so that he can go out and enjoy other things. I am literally Homer Simpson right now. So of course, as soon as I thought up of this idea, I did what any sane person would do and immediately ordered a drinking bird without hesitation. Actually, I ordered a 3-pack, because that was the only thing Amazon offered same-day delivery for. Considering that my end goal for this was to catch some Pokemon, I'd like to think of this purchase as Operation Dodrio. Alright, so first things first about this toy. It doesn't just run on its own. The bird's head has to be wet for it to function normally. It doesn't just go nuts unassisted, even though it always seems to on TV shows. And even though the beak has to be dipping down into the water, my thoughts were that we could use this bottom part to swing into the Joy-Con, providing the light amount of force needed to hit one of those triggers. Using some objects around the house to hold the Joy-Con and bird in place, I began the test. Wait for it. Wait for it. It doesn't register a press. See, if it did hit strong enough, those lights at the front of the controller would flash green for a second. But it's weird, because if I physically put the bird down, let go, and let it swing like a pendulum, it will hit hard enough. But the way that this bird moves on its own, the change in pressure from the methylene chloride just goes too slowly. Not to mention, even if it was strong enough, this thing swings a lot slower than I thought, about once a minute. This really isn't even worth the time saved to be worth the trouble, but I have one final idea. What if we lower the location of the water, forcing the bird to dip deeper and then swing back with even greater force? Instead of this nice tall mug, how about we pour this baby some shots? I decided that it was time to rely on something more powerful than an evaporation-based shift of temperature. We need something electric, something that can run for hours, and fast. I went to the land of the American dream, Walmart, with a conveniently placed Alolan Raichu taunting me the entire way. My goal was to find an electronic toy capable of providing me with a perpetual, battery-sustained motion. I needed something that keeps going, keeps hitting, keeps pressing and unpressing a button on my Joy-Con. In the interest of practicality, I bought the cheapest possible option I could spot, the remote control robotic battle space bot from Sharper Image. I found it in a clearance bin for $8. The idea is simple. Use the punching arms to constantly hit buttons for as long as the battery gives them power. It will be my literal robot assistant, playing my games for me just like the days of old. Cause, nothing ever went wrong when we let the robots play our video games. Well, it turns out that when you buy an $8 robot toy, you get an $8 robot toy. Don't expect it to punch for you. I was promised punching action, but what I got was completely unelectronic arms that swivel. This thing is a cheap RC car hidden in the Trojan horse of a cool, interactive, button-pressing robot toy. You know what they say. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. From here on out, we're gonna be building our solutions. Custom projects made specifically for pressing that button. And what would be a better way to build than by going back to the first thing I ever used to build in my life? Lego. Like the drinking bird, these universally recognized plastic toy bricks began production in the late 1940s. Today, they do everything from building a house, to recreating your favorite movie, to saving Mata Nui, to pushing a dang button. I searched online for something that automatically pushes buttons with Legos, and I found this solution, which uses a Lego Technic, a motor, and a battery to press a keyboard key over and over again. With all my old childhood Lego back across the country at my parents' place, I went to a local Lego hobbyist store to see how quickly and cheaply we could recreate this machine in the video. The employee there was super happy to help, as long as I was okay using an older 1990s motor, because they were out of the newest model. This is the exact motor I grew up using as a kid, so it was actually kind of nostalgic for me. It took less than 15 minutes to get this simple model recreating the one I saw in the video, and we were off to the races. The idea is that as long as you hold the machine and the Joy-Con perfectly in place, this thing can punch away at any button as long as your batteries keep going. I decided to hold the machine with some board games and the Joy-Con with a desk clamp, and for the first time, it just works! The A button is being pressed, and I don't have to be there. I ran a couple of streams with this thing, and I didn't even have to hold a controller. Both hands-free from tiny Joy-Cons in carpal tunnel the entire time. It's perfect! Well, almost perfect. You see, there's just this one thing. It's just that sometimes it's a little bit... It's loud! It's a bit loud. I did my research, but in the end, it turns out these old motors are just pretty dang loud, even under optimal conditions. And that's just a flaw we're gonna have to deal with. I think there's something poetic about this hunk of plastic and metal, potentially as old as I am, doing the work for me while I'm not around. Poetic, but not exactly elegant. Still, as long as I'm not in the same room as this thing and I don't have to hear it, everything is awesome. Before I get to my final, and in my opinion craziest methods, I want to give a shout out to Reddit user Space and Time, who found a solution for this exact same problem that I had, using a fan, tape, twine, cardboard, and a fishing swivel. The end result is delightfully Rube Goldbergian, and it looks a little something like this. I've linked their post in the description, which includes an entire illustrated tutorial for how to make a fan slapper of your own, so feel free to try it out. For my last methods, I decided to learn something completely foreign to me. Microcontrollers. Contrary to how it sounds, these aren't tiny video game controllers, but they're actually tiny computers on an integrated circuit. They come in many shapes and sizes, and they can be programmed externally from a computer and even interact over common connections like USB. Microcontrollers have done some pretty crazy stuff with Nintendo hardware. Modern DekuNukem made an absurdly complex system that automatically detected and captured shiny Pokémon on the 3DS. Another modder by the name of Shiny Quagsire used one to create a program that draws Splatoon 2 memes for you from an image that you feed into the computer. And YouTuber Pieman Rules repurposed that code to make a microcontroller that gave him timed jumps to beat the Mario Odyssey challenge. Of course, this solution doesn't work with Pokemon Let's Go, because it pretends to be a fight stick which plugs in like a Pro Controller, which doesn't work with Let's Go, but it is still super interesting and inspiring. As someone jumping completely blindly into the world of microcontrollers and related technology, I decided to start with a simple Arduino board and a simple project. These boards are open source and use a simplified C-based programming language for sending behaviors from your computer to the board. Because the Arduino board schematics are open source, you'll commonly find cheaper knockoff boards that function exactly the same as an official Arduino one. I started on this Elegoo branded knockoff of the Arduino Uno board. These boards alone are only about $10, but I got one of these cool starter kits for $35 that comes with a bunch of essential tools, like a breadboard, resistors, wires, diodes, and a handful of small electronics intended to help a beginner make some DIY computer solutions. My original goal was to use components such as a motor with the Arduino to make a similar and more personally programmed version of the Lego button spammer. However, before I even got to this solution, a viewer from my Facebook streams named Alejandro recommended something else: the solenoid. The solenoid is a coil of wire that acts as a magnet when electricity flows through it. Alejandro suggested I use a simple push-pull solenoid to repeatedly push and pull a rod to slap a button. I ended up grabbing this small 4.5 volt model for the job. Under normal circumstances, the Arduino I owned is best operated at 5 volts or less. Alejandro drew up a circuit schematic for how to connect the Arduino up to a solenoid, and I got to learning how to use a breadboard. Once the wires were in place, we put this code into the Arduino, setting it up to turn the solenoid on and off at an interval of milliseconds that we chose. And after some quick adjustments, voila! Click, clack, we're on the attack. With the weakest push-pull solenoid of all time. You really have to hit the right spot of the R button for this thing to provide enough force to register a push. But if you secure everything into place, it's by far our smallest and quietest solution yet. For my final method, we explored a new frontier. Pushing a button without pushing a button. For every single solution so far, we've been thinking mechanically. How can I get something to hit the button instead of me? But have you ever thought about what it is that a button actually does? Typically, pressing a button down completes a circuit with a piece of metal, allowing electricity to flow and send a signal. But if we go under the buttons and go to the board itself, hooking up wires from the Arduino to the JoyCon, we can stimulate the board below the button itself and trick the system into thinking that it has been pressed. Once again, I worked with Alejandro on this project, and once again, I looked to the works of DekuNukem, where they and a community of modders have worked to disassemble and explain everything related to JoyCon boards and its technology. After hours of testing, disassembling, reassembling, carefully and sometimes poorly applying a soldering iron to connect cables to the JoyCon board, we did it! It's beautiful! The perfect button masher! Temporarily removing the R button even gave me space to close the controller back up, making for our neatest and absolutely quietest solution. Using this code to send signals from the 7 pin to the ground pin on the Arduino, we created a JoyCon that can tirelessly mash the L button as long as the controller still has power. It trades non-stop. The version I made mashes the L button, and it's soldered pretty poorly to the board directly. My 2 wires are soldered here and here. I don't really advise that anyone do what I did, but I'm an amateur and soldering points this tiny was probably not a great first place to start. Eventually, Alejandro came to an optimal solution, which is ordering a separate ZL ribbon cable, about $10 or less, and then you safely solder the wires to that, here and here. Then you can replace this modded ribbon cable with the regular ZL button whenever you want and use the spammer mod. It still isn't easy, but this is the best way to attempt this mod without destroying the JoyCon board on its own. And as it turns out, mashing the yes button over and over again has some other uses too, such as feeding a single Pokemon 200 individual candies. Or you can even catch Pokemon without trying. Just buy 1,000 regular Pokeballs, put the game in undocked mode, stand in a Pokemon dense area, and let her rip. Your game will keep throwing Pokeballs immediately as soon as a Pokemon is encountered. I did this in Mount Moon in order to catch hundreds of Geodude for Alolan trading. Inexplicably, I even found a shiny Geodude in a batch of 400 captures. I wasn't even there for it. I popped a lure, but somehow, while the game was sitting by itself, a shiny Geodude spawned and walked into my stationary player and was captured by the least skilled Pokeball thrower of all time. I didn't even consider that this thing could catch shinies in any way other than the Alolans, but that's incredible. Now at this point, you gotta start thinking, how far is too far? Have I lost my mind? Is it worth potentially destroying an expensive JoyCon controller with hot melted metal, all so that I can obtain an alternate colored Pokemon without having to be physically present? Some people would even argue that what I'm doing invalidates all the hard work, the entire point of going into a difficult shiny hunt. After all, you weren't there for the struggle. Isn't that just lazy? If you aren't the one pressing the button, going through all those hours of work, did you even earn it? And to that I say, you would not believe how much work it took to get this lazy. I pushed that button.